joining us this morning. Those of you who are regular attendees of the VWV employment team's Wednesday webinars may recall that we had an immigration hijack of the webinar not too long ago, just towards the end of last year. And here we are hijacking the session once again, primarily because of it's the damn government coming in, introducing things and leading to lots of confusion. So we thought we'd try and provide a bit of clarity around what's been proposed and what's happening over the next few months. And I'm delighted to see so many of you having signed up to join us this morning. I'm also delighted to be joined by my colleague Nishil Patel, who's also a partner in the immigration team, based in our London office. Just by way of a couple of housekeeping points, as confirmed on the previous screen, this session is being recorded. A copy of the recording and the slides will be sent out in the next few days, so please don't panic and feel you have to scribble down every possible thing that we say or everything that comes up on the screen. As I say, slides and a recording will be sent round. If you're having any technical issues, either to do with the visuals or the sound, please do pop a message into the chat box. If you direct that to VWV Plus events, then our colleagues who are hosting the event and trying to make sure everything runs smoothly from a technical point of view will hopefully be able to assist. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A box, so please do pop those in that, and we will hopefully have some time at the end for questions. Nishil and I will try and field those as we conclude, but it might well be that all of your questions will be answered as we proceed through our slides. So here's our agenda for this morning. We're going to spend the majority of the time, I would have thought, concentrating on this new 5-point plan introduced by the Home Secretary to reduce migration. I'm going to provide a bit of background and context for that, an overview of the plan itself, and then Nishil will talk you through some of the details, what we know so far as far as changes to skilled worker visas, the health and care visa, family visas. Once we're done with the plan, once we've answered all of your questions as far as that's concerned, we will then move on to some other upcoming changes, changes to visit rules and changes to the youth mobility scheme. And then finally, I'm going to conclude just with a bit of an update on the government's transition to a digital-only immigration system and the introduction of the electronic travel authorization scheme. So just a bit of an update on where we are with that. Before we get into the meat of the issues we want to discuss this morning, I'd be very grateful if you could answer this poll for us. We'd just like to see what your interest in this webinar is. So are you considering becoming a licensed sponsor? Are you interested in the changes to the skilled worker visa? Interested in changes to health and care visas? You're interested in changes to the rules on family migration? Maybe it's the visit rules that you're interested in. Or maybe you're not interested in immigration at all. You just like these wonderful webinars that VWV put on from time to time. Give you a moment or two to tell us what your interest is. All right, well, unsurprisingly, most of you are interested in what's changing as far as skilled worker visas are concerned. Yes, overwhelming majority of you are interested in that. Not insignificant number interested in health and care visas, about 20%, 22% of you. The interest in the changes to the visit rules is good. I think that there's certainly some significant changes there. So pleased to see that's a topic. It's a topic that most businesses and employers should think about, perhaps more than many do. So glad to see that you're interested in that, as well as the rules on family migration. All right, thank you for that. Good to see. Right, so let's provide a bit of context then. So why is it that this has become a hot topic all over again? Well, immigration is always, as long as I've been doing it, been a very politically driven area of law, and that's certainly the case at the moment. Over the last 15 years or so, politicians and the government in particular have been obsessed by the numbers on this chart: net migration into the UK, the number of people coming in on a longer term basis, the number of people leaving on a long term basis. Ignore deaths, ignore births. It's just those flows of people that that the politicians are interested in. And it was back, you'll recall back in 2010 during the election campaign, that David Cameron promised to reduce net migration to the tens of thousands rather than its current level, which at that point was around 200,000 or so. And so lots of government policies since, lots of changes to the migration system. And look at the chart. It was a pandemic that meant that pledge could finally be met, bringing net migration into the UK below 100,000 during the course of the pandemic. Since then, we've had the end of the Brexit period, and net migration, as you can see, has absolutely skyrocketed. It's come down in some areas, so the chart breaks down where people are coming from, and as you can see, having told EU nationals through the Brexit vote that we don't want them here, they've said, okay, fine, we're off then. And a very sharp fall in net migration from EU countries, but it's the rest of the world. It's people coming from other countries that have really driven these numbers up over the last couple of years. You can see from the estimates that actually numbers are looking to come down again fairly significantly, and in a slide or two I'll be able to provide a bit more context to that. Why are people coming to the UK? What are the reasons for this? Well, the large chart just looks at immigration, people coming into the UK, and following pretty similar patterns to the net migration figures. When you break those figures down, you can see that. So looking at the chart on the right hand side, this breaks down the reasons, or the type of visas that people are being issued year on year, and figures look fairly stable from 2019 through to 2021, and then post-pandemic, post-Brexit transition period, we had this huge leap in pretty much all areas. I don't know if the colours are coming across terribly well on the on the slides, but the large block at the bottom, the dark blue, study visas, lots of pent up for demand for student visas during the pandemic. Policies including the graduate route, which have encouraged more international students into the UK. Strategies of many universities to grow by increasing international students while home fees are frozen. And so what do you know, pent up demand, you pull out the plug of the pandemic, and suddenly a very large increase in student visa applications. Similarly, quite a large increase in work visas. That's not just because, as you can see from the chart on the left, that's not necessarily because EU nationals wanting to come to the UK now need visas. It's an increase in demand for work visas of all types, but that's probably because EU nationals who are leaving the UK are leaving vacancies, and so they have to be filled by somebody. And if you can't find the talent, or even if it's not talented, if it's just any sort of level of work, you're then looking overseas to try and fill those vacancies. So large increases in work visas over the last couple of years. And then we've got some temporary stuff. So that the humanitarian routes, the burgundy, if you like, color, sort of barely registering at all, 2019 through to 2021, and then 2022, large numbers of people coming on humanitarian routes, and those are principally routes for people coming out of Ukraine and people coming out of Hong Kong after a humanitarian route was introduced for British national overseas citizens. So we would expect those numbers. I mean, that's one of the reasons for the prediction of those numbers falling. Students leaving the UK when their courses are finished, and also those humanitarian routes once, well, as we would all hope, once the war in Ukraine has finished, then the expectation is that many Ukrainians who have come here on a temporary basis will then return. So we would expect a sort of tailing off or reduction in those numbers in future years. And then just drilling further into the numbers on work visas, what's been quite useful, just from I suppose from the point of view of someone who looking at the numbers, is that just over a year ago, or a couple of years ago, in fact, but a year ago in terms of being able to see a full year's worth of figures, the skilled worker visa was sort of or out of the skilled worker visa was carved the health and care subcategory of skilled worker. So we now have figures from the Home Office which break down people granted health and care visas as opposed to other skilled work routes, and you can see that that's what's driving the increase in work visas, and it's those figures, the increase in health and care, but also other work routes, that has led to this 5-point plan announced back in December by the Home Secretary. 5-point plans seem to be the thing, seem to be what everybody wants to introduce, and it's a sort of theme throughout government to have a 5-point plan to tackle one problem or another. So we've got a 5-point plan to reduce immigration. We have a 5-point plan to tackle climate change. We have a 5-point plan to bring about the end of unsafe cladding. There was a 5-point plan during the probably lots of 5-point plans during the pandemic. There was a 5-point plan for government as a whole, a 5-point plan to reduce the global health crisis. And it's not just government. Lameness in sheep needs a 5-point plan as well. You'll be interested to know. So what's this 5-point plan all about then? Well, these are the headlines. Care workers will not be allowed to bring their dependents. So anybody coming on the health and care visa that we talked about will not be allowed to bring dependents. That's their partners and children as they are currently. The baseline minimum salary to sponsor a skilled worker will increase from 26,200 quite significantly to 38,700. Point 3 is to review the shortage occupation list and replace it with an immigration salary list. Currently, there's a discount in the minimum salary requirement if your job is on the shortage occupation list. The government want to end that. Almost mentioned as an aside, but the thing that's really got the headlines from this 5-point plan is the increase of the minimum income requirement for people applying under the spouse and partner visa routes. That's partners of British citizens or people who are otherwise settled in the UK. So that will also increase to 38,700. And point 5, the Migration Advisory Committee have been asked to review the graduate visa. So 5 points, but really only 3 of them are substantive. I get the feeling that points 3 and 5 were really just scrabbling around for some additional points to include in a 5-point plan, because one is a review, and well, actually both of them are asking the Migration Advisory Committee to review existing aspects of the immigration system, the shortage occupation list and the graduate visa. So it's the 3 other points that we will focus on, and I shall hand you over to Nishil to take you through those.
Thank you, Tom. So one of the biggest headlines within these new immigration changes was with regards to the skilled worker visa. and probably something, as we can see from the poll, everyone is most interested in. So the salary threshold for the skilled worker visa will increase from 26,200 to 38,700 from spring this year. Now, this is a huge increase of nearly 50%. Now, you're probably wondering, how is this calculated? Now, with a skilled worker visa, this is only applicable for job roles which are RVQ level 3 and above. So what the government have said is that those job roles within that banding, the average salary for those types of job roles is 38,700, and that's where they've got that figure from. Now, this figure will not apply to anybody who's doing sort of public sector roles, so within healthcare. So, for example, medical practitioners, dentists, nurses. And it also doesn't affect anyone in the education sector, so anyone, any sort of primary teachers, nursery teachers, anyone like that. The other thing that another group of people that it won't affect is anybody who's already within the skilled worker visa route at the moment. So anybody who's already got a skilled worker visa and who's looking to extend their visa later on, or who's going to be applying for indefinite leave to remain, they will also not be affected by this new higher salary threshold of 38,700. However, what you do need to know is that anybody who is going to looking to who's looking to extend or apply for indefinite leave to remain, they will need to make sure that they meet the salary threshold of the particular job role that they'll be doing. And as Tom said, that they are looking to upgrade the pay scales for those particular job roles. So when you are looking to extend an employee's visa, then it must make sure that where you're extending that employee's visa, that their salary meets the threshold of their particular job role. Another area which is not being clear and which we kind of waiting the finer detail on is regards to anybody who's a new entrant. So at the moment, a new entrant is for anybody, so for a student who has completed their degree within the UK and is switching to a skilled worker visa, or anybody who is under the age of 26. Now, for these types of people, there is a lower salary threshold at the moment of 20,960. So what we don't know is whether there will be a new entrant salary threshold within the new spring changes, and whether anybody who's looking to then switch from a student visa to a skilled worker visa will be eligible for a lower salary band. And that is something that we can update you on as soon as we get some more information in spring. Next slide. One of the areas that the government are looking at is with regards to the health and care worker visas. And as you can see from Tom's graph, these are the most commonly applied for visas within the last year. And another thing is that the government have found that there's been they've found that there has been abuse within this visa route as well. So sponsors are sponsoring individuals within this category who don't have genuine job offers, or they're not being paid the correct amount of salary. So what they wanted to do, the government, is make the application route a little bit stricter. So from spring of this year, anybody who's coming on a health and care worker visa will no longer be able to bring their dependents to the UK. Any care provider in England who is looking to sponsor a migrant, that care provider must only sponsor an individual who's going to be doing CQC regulated activities. Anybody who's already on a health and care worker visa will be able to extend their stay on a healthcare worker visa. So they would not be affected by this new change. And they'll also be able to bring their dependents into the UK. So say, for example, there is a health and care worker who's in the UK, who's just about to have a baby. They can then apply for a dependent visa for that baby to remain in the UK. This health and care worker visa route will only be applicable for anybody who's coming into the category or who's new coming into the category. And for anybody new, they are the ones who will not be able to bring in their dependents into the UK. Any care provider who's not doing CQC regulated activities and is currently sponsoring an individual within this remit, then they will be able to continue to sponsor individuals. They'll be able to sponsor that particular individual within that category, but they won't be able to sponsor anybody new from spring of this year if they are not doing a regulated activity. So that's going to be a big change for any care provider. Next slide. So a big poll that we want to sort of ask you about is, how will the increased skills salary threshold, how will it affect you? So if you can either answer, it won't, all sponsored roles pay more than 38,700. It won't, all sponsored roles are on national pay scales. It will somewhat be an issue, but some sponsored roles will mostly be okay. It will be a big issue, but most sponsored roles will no longer qualify, but some will be okay. And finally, we won't be able to sponsor anyone anymore. So it'd be just good to know your thoughts on that. I'll just give you a few minutes. Okay, fantastic. So we have sort of over half who think that it will be somewhat an issue. Some will qualify, but some will qualify, but some will not qualify. So it's a bit of a mixed bag there. Interestingly, the 10%, it won't affect them at all. So they are within that higher salary band. And then you've got that sort of 3 people who unfortunately won't be able to sponsor anyone anymore. And for those individuals, it will be interesting to see whether there will be a new entrant salary rate, and whether, if there is a new entrant salary rate, whether that will then enable you to sponsor, say, for example, students or anyone under the age of 26 to come to the UK. So that would be quite interesting to see that. So as Tom was saying, one of the biggest headline grabbing moments with regards to the family visa and the changes around that. And at the moment, anybody who's looking to bring their partner into the UK, who's a British national, who's settled in the UK, looking to bring their partner to the UK, they need to meet a particular financial threshold. At that moment, the financial threshold is 18,600. And what the government are looking to do is increase that to 38,700. And that was a huge, big headline, moving it way up to 38,700. Now, days after that announcement, there was a petition within the government. And also there was clarity from the Prime Minister, who wanted to clarify exactly what he meant by the higher salary threshold. So what he said was that there's actually going to be a more phased approach in terms of increasing these salary thresholds. So for anyone in spring 2024, it will be increased to 29,000. It will then be increased to 34,500. And then from early next year, it will then increase further to the higher band of 38,700. Now, this is a really strange decision from the government, because the 38,700 limit is based on the skilled worker visa salary threshold. And it shouldn't really affect anybody who's coming on a family visa, because there was never a requirement on an individual needing a higher salary or skills threshold band to come into the UK. And they're measuring that on a really strange pay scale. So, and also, if you look at the salary bands across the whole occupations within the UK, the average salary that someone is paying is less than that. So it's £34,963. So it's quite largely disproportionate to actually what we're seeing. It also doesn't take into effect a lot of the occupations. So, average salary for women, workers under the age of 30, anybody age 60 and above, anybody living outside London, there's a higher salary band in London, but what about the regional salary pay thresholds? It also affects those public sector job roles and those individuals who are doing jobs within those areas. How are they going to meet that higher salary band? And that's why there's so much commotion at the moment. The other thing to note is that it's, for example, if an individual does not have the income to be able to bring an individual into the UK, they can then prove their financial threshold by savings. But if they're providing savings alone, then there is quite a high threshold already. So, for example, anybody who does not have a financial income, if they can show that they've got £62,500 within the last 6 months, then they can bring that individual into the UK. However, this is based on the 18,600 threshold. If they're going to be increasing the threshold to 38,700, this is going to be way above the £62,500. And how is anybody going to be able to have that level of savings to be able to bring their partner into the UK? So it does really feel a bit unjust and unfair for those who have a relationship with an individual who would like to settle in the UK. And it doesn't sound, it does sound quite unfair. That's it. Next slide.
Nishil, before we move on from these changes, I thought we might just take some of the questions that have been posted to the Q&A already, because there are a lot of questions going in, just to sort of clear up, I think, a few few points of confusion. So I'll just run through some, and then I might throw a couple to you if that's
of course,
that's okay.
Yeah.
So first query, just to confirm that the minimum salary increase is not applicable for teaching staff. We covered that. So if it's a teaching job under one of the so a primary teacher, nursery teacher, secondary teacher, then those jobs are governed by the salaries for those jobs are governed by the national teacher pay scales. That's irrespective of whether they're employed by an independent school or an academy or a maintained school. The national teacher pay scales are the reference point for those salaries, and it won't be that new 38,700 threshold. Lecturer jobs, so FE lecturer jobs are also, as far as we can tell, subject to national teacher pay scales, but HE teaching roles aren't. They have their own collective bargaining, but they're not, as far as the immigration rules are concerned, governed by national pay scales. And so it would look like the 38,700 will apply to roles at universities, lecturer and research roles at universities. What we don't know, as Nishil said, we don't know whether the new entrant rate will survive these changes. We also don't know whether the PhD discount that currently exists will survive these changes. So we're really waiting for the detail in those. And just to give you an indication as to timescale, I think that's another question we've had. All we've been told so far is the spring. Usually we get a set of rule changes come into force on or around the 6th of April. The rules have to be laid 21 days prior to them coming into force. So we'd probably be looking at, I would imagine we'll be finding out sort of beginning middle of March some more detail, if it's not sort of leaked or disclosed to a further degree before then. I think that's covered a few of the questions. Some people asking about the phased introduction of the new salary rate. That only applies, I think this is right, Nishil, that's only applying to the partner route, right? Not to skilled workers.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, what other questions have we got?
I think there's one about whether someone's on a graduate visa and if they can switch to a skilled worker visa now, even though the graduate visa is going to be expiring sort of a year later. Yes, you can switch to a skilled worker visa now or at any point if there is a lower salary band at the moment and they are able to qualify for a skilled worker visa, then you can sponsor them at this stage.
Yeah. Will the salary increase affect people switching visas, i.e. youth mobility to skilled worker? Well, yes, it would if the switch takes place after the rules take place. So as you say, it might well be worth considering switching them before the rules come into force. Does the new salary threshold apply to skilled workers under a shortage occupation? That's one of the things that they're looking at getting rid of. They're looking at replacing the shortage occupation list and replacing it with this immigration salary list. So I think that's one of the things they want to scrap. If we were to become a sponsored employer, would we have to follow the salary threshold of 38,700, or are there exemptions from the automotive industry? Well, that's the bit we don't know. So there are some exemptions from the 26,200 at the moment. New entrants, PhD discounts, shortage occupation. We know shortage occupation's going. We're not sure about the other two just yet. Nishil, have you picked out? Oh, part-time workers. So you can't prorate someone's earnings based on their hours to satisfy there's effectively two salary thresholds that operate in tandem. You've got the salary threshold for the category, which is currently 26,200, and you can't prorate that. The 26,200 is increasing to 38,700, so we wouldn't expect that to be prorated. You can prorate the minimum salary that's required for the occupation that the person's sponsored under. The requirement is to be paid the lesser of those two rates. So if someone's part-time, if their actual earnings will drop below 38,700, then we expect it to be the case that wouldn't satisfy the requirement. Any other questions that you've picked out, Nishil? Does the family route? Oh, go on.
Yeah, so it someone's asked, you say that 38,700 won't apply to nurses. Is this just NHS? What about private care homes? This applies to all nurses, so anybody who's based on a national pay scale, they would not be they would not need to meet that higher salary threshold, but they'll need to meet the national pay scale threshold for nurses.
Right. Yep. Someone's asked, does the family route replace ancestry visa? No, they're separate categories. So the ancestry visa will, as far as we know, not doing anything to change that. Does the minimum salary increase that doesn't impact education also include teachers to support roles? Would they be impacted by the change? So teaching assistants, perversely, don't come under the national teacher pay scales, and so a teaching assistant would be subject to the 38,700, but the classroom teacher that they're working with would not be. So how's that for a coherent policy? Can non-care workers bring their family over, such as medical scientists who work in our laboratory? There's been no proposal to change that at all. So it's just people being sponsored for health and care visas. When will a revised list of salary thresholds become available? Well, we're expecting that sort of probably mid-March. Let's throw this one to you, Nishil. Can I clarify that the new minimum income requirement for family routes is a joint requirement, not an individual requirement?
So it is for so anybody who's bringing a partner into the UK, then it is for the individual to be able to show that their sponsor is able to have that level of salary into the UK. If they are in the UK, then you can combine income in the UK, but it depends on the circumstances of the individual.
Right. So yeah. So if they're applying for the first time from overseas, then it's the UK-based partners or the British partners' salary that you need to rely on. But once the person's here, then you can rely on
together.
Yeah, joint earnings. What if we have someone on a partner visa that no longer meets the criteria who wants to apply for a skilled worker visa in their own right, but is below the minimum salary? Well, I suppose if you can sponsor them before, well, actually, if they're already on a partner visa, then as Nishil said, then the salary increases the minimum income requirement changes won't apply to them. Then they will continue to be able to apply on the basis of the current salary threshold requirement. So you don't have to worry about switching them. All right, still the questions keep coming. What about sixth form teachers? Are they exempt from this new threshold? It depends on whether you classify them as a secondary teacher. If they're being sponsored as a secondary teacher, then then the national teacher pay scales apply. So yeah, they would continue to be exempt. If someone already on the spouse visa but needs to reapply once more before applying for ILR, will they be assessed against current requirements? Yes, we've covered that. Skilled workers visa is due to expire in July, at which point we'll be looking to sponsor for a further year. Would this trigger the new rate? So no, where they're already on the skilled worker route, then the current thresholds apply, other than they will be looking to continue to increase them against the 25th percentile over the next few years. Okay, this one might get complicated. I'm confused by the current 26,200 a year increasing to 38,700. Currently, under the tradable points system, we sponsor workers earning less than 26,200 if they have other tradable points. Will there still be tradable points for salaries less than 38,700? Don't know if you want to just repeat yourself on that one, Nishil.
Oh, sorry. You go ahead. I was
okay.
Else, yeah.
Sorry. So the point is that there are tradable points currently for new entrants, PhD holders or relevant PhD holders, and shortage occupation list roles. We don't know about new entrants. We don't know about PhD. We do know that shortage occupation lists are going to go. So the answer is we still don't know. We don't know whether there still will be tradable points. We imagine they will be, but we don't know for certain. Someone said, I believe that university lecturers are excluded, though. Well, that's not quite right. They're currently, under the immigration rules, university lecturers' salaries aren't based on national teacher pay scales. There's a minimum specified, and they're not treated. Their salaries aren't treated in the same way as primary, secondary, nursery teachers. Unless there is, so that there are, as we've just discussed, there are discounts available for university lecturers where they have a relevant PhD or the job is on the shortage occupation list, but we don't, certainly we know what's happening to the shortage occupation list, but we don't know for certain what's happening as far as PhD discount or the new entrant rate. I think we've probably got through it. We'll try and pick up some more maybe at the end. Nishil, do you want to move on with next slides, and then we'll see if we can pick up some more Q&A towards the end. All right.
Thanks, Tom. So one of the areas that the government are looking to make a bit more clearer is with regards to business visitors and what permissible activities they can do within the UK, because there is quite a grey area within the immigration rules at the moment. So from the 31st of January, a business visitor can come to the UK to conduct their permissible activity, like attending a business meeting, attending a one-off training, meeting colleagues. But as long as as long as that is their main purpose of the role, whilst they're in the UK, they can actually also conduct remote working as well. So that is a big change that they've included within the rules. Another area is with regards to any employees from an overseas company coming into the UK. So anybody who is from an overseas employer coming into the UK to work for their overseas employer, then they can come to the UK as a business visitor on the basis that they're doing a client-facing activity, and that activity must be incidental to their employment abroad. Previously, it was only allowed an internal activity, but now they're allowing the client-facing activity within the rules. This activity, however, cannot be an offshoring of a project or service to their overseas employer. So that is still a not permissible activity, and that will require working visa. Another area that they've looked at is with regards to scientists, researchers, and academics. And now these individuals are able to come to the UK as a business visitor to conduct research. At the moment, these individuals are only able to come to do their own independent research, and academics can only conduct research if they're on a sabbatical. So that is a big change for anybody who's sort of within the education sector or universities, or within the pharma or scientist field looking to conduct some research within the UK. Anybody who's looking to speak at a conference can also be paid for this activity. So that is a big change that will be occurring on the 31st of January. Another area that they've looked at is with regards to the permitted paid engagement. Now, previously, it was used for academics who are coming into the UK to be examiners, or anybody sort of an air pilot examiner, for example, or a lawyer who's meeting a client. That kind of activity was a permitted paid engagement. And those individuals would have needed a separate visa to be able to come to the UK. Now the permitted paid engagement category is going to be moved within the visitor visa category. So that means that anybody who's on a visitor visa that will be doing a permitted paid engagement, they will be able to come under their visitor visa to be able to do that. And for example, those non-visa nationals, so anyone from the US or Australia, for example, that doesn't need a visa to come in as a visitor, they can show up with their passport on arrival in the UK. They'll probably have to qualify with an immigration officer as to what type of activity they're doing, but then they could then pass through and they won't need a visa to do that type of activity. So that is a big change. Next slide. Another route that has looking to, or at the moment being reformed, is the Youth Mobility Scheme visa route. And that is for working holiday makers from eligible countries coming into the UK as a working holiday maker to experience the life of the UK. And that would also allow them to work in the UK. And this scheme was eligible typically for those countries that have reciprocal agreements with the UK as well. And that was for nationals from New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Monaco, San Marino, Iceland, Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, India. And it's for those individuals who can come to the UK for 2 years, and they would have to be aged 18 to 30 when they apply. And if you can see from the graph, the most majority of people or the allocations available are from those individuals coming from Australia. Then we've got New Zealand, and then Canada, and then we've got a less of an allocation. And what I mean by allocation is that there is a certain amount of people that can come under this route into the UK, and they have a quota limit. So for example, for India, there is a kind of like a lottery scheme where they have to apply for their interest in applying for a youth mobility visa. And if they're lucky to be selected, then they will get an allocation. And within that allocation, they will then be able to apply for a youth mobility visa. So it's not just an unlimited amount of people that can come from India who would qualify. There's a certain quota, and that would apply to them. For New Zealand citizens, they're now going to be increasing the age band. So anybody from New Zealand who is now over the age of 30, who's now up to the age of 35, can come to the UK and a working holiday maker visa, but not just for 2 years. They can actually now extend for up to 3 years. So they can spend 3 years in the UK on this visa. The individuals from Australia, Canada, and Korea, the age band will also be increased to them as well, to 35. And anyone who's coming from Australia and Canada, once they're in the UK and they've completed their 2 years, they can now actually extend their stay for a further year. So they can spend 3 years on a working holiday maker whilst they're in the UK. The government are also looking to include other countries into the Youth Mobility Scheme visa route. And from the 31st of January, they'll be including Andorra and Uruguay to the list. Now, the Youth Mobility Visa, it does allow an individual to come to the UK in order to experience life in the UK. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't allow an individual to settle in the UK if they're predominantly on this visa route. So if they did want to extend their status further, then they could extend their stay by switching onto a skilled worker visa whilst they're on the Youth Mobility Visa. And that is an option available to them. And they can do that whilst they're in the UK. Perfect. So now I'll just hand it over to Tom, who will speak about some of the other changes that we have seen.
Thanks, Nishil. I was typing away at some of the answers there. I realised I didn't mute myself, so apologies if you picked up on my clicking on my keyboard. So just going to very quickly remind you about another pretty significant change which is about to take effect, which is the increase in the immigration health surcharge. The regulations which have been laid before Parliament to give effect to the increase have now passed both houses. The regulations haven't yet been made, though. They need to be signed by a minister. I would expect that to take place probably either today or tomorrow. So that being the case, we're probably looking at the health surcharge increase coming into force probably around the 6th or 7th of February. So if you've got anybody you're working with on a skilled worker or indeed any other visa application where the health surcharge will apply, then I'll try and get that in before that very hefty increase comes into force. I won't go into detail, you can see from the slide, but we're talking about very, very large increases and something to be avoided if at all possible. Our sort of message around that really is just sort of with such high increases, it's going to be harder and harder for people to be able to afford to pay those fees themselves. So you might need to think about what you do in terms of loaning members of staff the fees they need to pay pay when submitting a visa application, or whether you agree in some cases to pay the fees altogether. Certain fees can be recovered if you pay them on a sponsored worker's behalf. Just a reminder, you can't pass on the immigration skills charge, and we've seen some correspondence from the Home Office which suggests that they think that if you try to recover the certificate of sponsorship fee from a sponsored worker, that might suggest that the job's not genuine. It's only £239, so in the scheme of things, safer to swallow that rather than pass that on, I would say. Quick update on right to work checks. That's another change which is likely to come into force. Again, we're awaiting the confirmation and the signing of regulations to bring into effect the increase of the maximum civil penalty from 20,000 to 60,000. It will be quite considerably after 22nd of January, as again, those regulations will come into force 21 days after they've been made, and they haven't yet been made. Just a quick reminder, this isn't a recent change, but just as a reminder as to the process and the requirements for conducting right to work checks, there are now effectively 3 different ways in which you can carry out a check. You can do a manual check on a physical document, which is listed in the Home Office's right to work checklist. Manual checks can be done on, when you're conducting manual checks, they would take place on somebody from anywhere in the world. It might be they've got a British passport, or it might be that they've got a visa endorsed in their current passport. So they're from overseas. A type of check that you would only do on a non-British or Irish citizen would be an online right to work check of someone's digital status. If someone presents a biometric residence permit, that is no longer on the list of acceptable documents. So you can't do a manual check on a BRP. Instead, the person has to use the BRP to generate a share code and then you use that share code to check their digital status online. So that's the second type of check. And the third check, which is only available for British or Irish passport holders, is to engage an IDSP, an identity service provider, to conduct a remote check using the British and Irish passport databases to verify that person's identity and check that they do indeed have the right to work. So the IDSP presents you with a report, and then that is your proof of that person's right to work. But that's only available for, say, British or Irish passport holders. Wes, and again, a reminder, not a change, but if you have somebody who you're looking to employ or is currently employed and they have an application or appeal pending, then you can use the employer checking service to confirm that they have a right to work by issuing you with a positive verification notice. So just a quick roundup on that. Interested to know whether you've used a share code to check someone's e-visa. They're becoming more and more prevalent. So quick straw poll. What's a share code? I don't conduct right to work checks. So I've not personally checked any. I do carry out right to work checks, but I've not done one using a share code. I've done it just once. I've done it a few. I'm an old hat at this. I've done it all the time. I've done loads. It's interesting to see how familiar people are with this now. All right, let's end that there. Most of you have done loads. We're all very familiar with doing right to work checks using share codes. Good. The Home Office will be very delighted in your compliance. Just a reminder, we do offer a series of e-learning, our HR and employment law for line managers courses, and the only reason I mention it, there's loads of stuff in there. It's really good. I imagine, but the best bit is the section on right to work checks. Other than the fact that you got to hear me talking about right to work checks if you do subscribe. You take part in that. If you would be interested, if your organization would be interested in subscribing to our e-learning package, please vote in the poll and somebody will be in touch to talk to you some more about that. So yes, I'm looking to implement training. Yes, please, but I'm not looking to implement any new training. But yeah, either way, if you could let us know if you're interested, that would be great. Thank you. So I'm going to rattle through this stuff on digital, and then we'll see if we can just pick up some more of your questions. Those of you who are dealing with work visas or indeed any type of visa will have noticed that anybody with a BRP, that all BRPs are scheduled to expire either on or before the 31st of December 2024. And for those of you who don't know, the reason for this is that the government's intention is for the immigration system to become, as they say, digital by default. In other words, everyone will have an e-visa. Nobody will have a BRP anymore. This is the plan. This is the strategy. Let's wait and see if it's fully implemented or whether they have to row back and there are any delays to that. But that's certainly the plan as things stand. A key part of that program is the introduction of the electronic travel authorization scheme. This is to enable people who are from countries where you would normally need a visa to get a digital authorization. In fact, the proposal is that everybody will require a digital authorization before coming to the UK. That electronic authorization will be for those who are coming to the UK as visitors. Anybody who needs another type of visa will be granted an e-visa, so a skilled worker would still apply for a skilled worker in the usual way. And then the airlines will check this person's online account, and they'll either have an ETA, electronic authorization, travel authorization, or they'll have a visa, and then they can get on the plane. And if you've got neither from the full introduction of this scheme, then you're not traveling to the UK. So everybody will need something, some digital authorization be that a visa or be that an ETA. So the ETA is being rolled out. The ETA program is being rolled out quite slowly. Qatari nationals are already in it, and then from the 1st of February, some wider Gulf state countries will also need it. And the reason for the slow rollout is to make sure that airlines are able to access the ETA data and that the system is is working as it should. And then, as I say, by the end of the year, in theory, everybody, if you're a US citizen coming for a holiday, you will need an ETA before you get on the plane. For those who already hold visas and have got BRPs that are expiring on the 31st of December this year, which is before their actual visa expiry date, then at some point in the next few months, we're expecting further instructions from government on how they can create a UK VI account and then access and share that e-visa more widely. All right, quick poll just to see if anybody would like any support from Nishil, myself, or our team with regard to any immigration issues you might be you might have. Various options. So we can offer you a helpline, advice on right to work checks. Maybe looking to apply for a sponsor license. Maybe you have a license already. You'd like some support with compliance. You'd like some visa application support for your employees. Maybe you'd like us to come and do an audit. Who wants an audit? Nobody, presumably. We offer training, and if there's anything else that you think you might like, do let us know by answering the poll, and we will be in touch. Right, we'll leave that up on the screen. I'll just try and see if we can pick up on some more questions. Somebody else a sort of fairly complicated question about going through a redundancy process who's on a graduate visa. I think that probably sort of drifts into needing maybe some employment advice on that. So I don't want to deal with that live and risk opening myself up for a negligence claim. So will the salary requirements for spouse visas apply to dependents under the skilled worker visa route? No, they don't. And other than people coming under the health and care visa, who won't be able to bring dependents, people will still be able to bring dependents, and they will have, as they do now, as far as we know, full access to the labour market to work, start a business, whatever they want. Will the 38,700 apply for new applications from spring 2024 or 2025? So just in case there's some confusion around that, for 38,700, we're expecting to apply to skilled worker applications from spring 2024. 38,700, the proposal is to apply from spring 2025 for the minimum income requirement for partner applications. That's right, isn't it, Nishil?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, all right. I should say a couple of useful points posted in the Q&A, which I have responded to. So you can see those if you look in the answered section. Just someone has pointed out there was a speech in Parliament from the Immigration Minister confirming that they did expect that there would continue to be some exemptions. So whether that continues to be in their current form, but it sounds like the PhD and new entrant discounts will continue to apply in one form or another, although let's wait and see when we have the detail. A company secretary of an academy's trust, would they be subject to 38,700? Yes, they would, because that doesn't qualify under the minimum income requirement. Should we pick up on a couple more?
Yeah, there was one about the youth mobility visa, whether does the 3 years need to complete before they are 35. As long as if they want to extend for their further year, they have to be under the age of 35 at that point. So at the date of application, and then if they cross over whilst they're on the youth mobility visa, then that wouldn't be a problem.
Right, great. Well, someone's asked, I assume we don't have to conduct a further right to work check when the BRP expires. If you've If your statutory excuse derives from having checked their digital status, then no, that should take you up until the actual expiry of their visa, not the premature expiry of their visa when the BRP expires. But if they started work at a time when you could accept BRPs when conducting right to work checks, and that was only up to the end of 31st of December 2024, then that's when your statutory excuse expires. And so you would need to do a further check at that point. Hope that answers your question. So we have to do a right to work check on all British Irish passports via an IDSP. No, that's not right. You can still check the original British or Irish passport. The IDSP is just an alternative option for checking the immigration status of someone who holds a British or Irish passport. What does you must not pass on IHS fees mean? Maybe I misspoke. You can't pass on the immigration skills charge, which you pay when you assign a certificate of sponsorship. You could pay the health surcharge if you wanted, and then recover that from the employee under the current rules. Nishil, we're past 11 o'clock. I think probably, although there are still some questions, I think probably most people will have had their fill of us by now. So thank you all very much for attending. Very grateful to see so many of you here. I hope that's been of some help. Apologies we couldn't give you all of the answers, but we are still waiting for them. And we will put out articles and maybe see you again on another webinar when we do have more detail. So yeah, thanks very much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.